My name is NAKIIM Bey, that's B-E-Y, and I'm a Aborigine of New York City, the USA. And my education, I have a BA in social science. I was fortunate to meet Rosa Parks back in mid-90s when I was in college. She was a civil rights fighter, and she was the one that paved the way for many black people in America to ride the bus today. She's the one that refused to walk to the back, and she went through arrest among other things. So I met her, and it was definitely an honor. I have also executive leadership cert in different areas: leadership, negotiation, coaching, etc. From where we are currently at, Cornell University. And I also have a certificate from Harvard in disruptive strategy. I have also a executive strategy cert from Oxford University. And also I have one from Cambridge University, which is called the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership, that goes into the area of the 17 sustainable goals. So that is my education from the academia perspective. And also I have a certification from the United Nations, Mrs. Lauren from Trinidad. She had trained us a few years back, and diplomatic protocol. So I can go on into international law, and I can speak on things from that perspective. But my intro to the international arena didn't start there. It started in mid-1990s, around like 94, 93. I was introduced by a friend of mine to Ambassador Charles Flemings at that time. He was the ambassador of St. Lucia. And a friend of mine from St. Kitts, he introduced me because he knew I was about humanitarian work. And at that time, I was working on establishing, as he called it, as a recommendation, a Moorish republic. The Moors is a very ancient history. They are the Muslims who ruled the world in the 7 seas. They influenced Spain, you could say Mali, all throughout Europe. So my last name, Bey, B-E-Y, is a noble, honorable title. You have the Bey of Tunis, the Dey of Algiers, and the Pasha of Tripoli. So those African descendants here in America were introduced to Islam by a man named Prophet Noble Ali, who told us that we were not blacks, niggers, or coloreds, that we was Moors, descendants of a great empire. And we have reclaimed our names, our surnames, that link us to our forefathers and divine creed. And what's great about that is that the Moorish goals is always to uplift fallen humanity. So we civilized the world, we ran the world before Europeans even had civilization that we gave to them. So that is the history. And when Charles Flemings, Ambassador Charles Flemings, when he knew my history as a Moor, I still have the letter, and I'll email it to you at some point, maybe over the weekend, that he said the Moors have historical respect because of international relations from the past to current. So that was the initial introduction of my interest in international relations.
Though, finally, as a Moor, I would really like to know or to understand, have you been to Mauritania or to south of Morocco? I think maybe probably this is where they can find the remaining more actually living in Africa.
Good question. The answer is no. Actually, I was planning on making a trip there next year. However, what's called today contemporary Morocco, that we call it, is not the ancient Morocco.
Yeah.
It's like calling Africa Africa,
Yeah.
and it was named after Leo Africanus,
Yes.
who was originally a Muslim, a African, and Leo Africanus, the Pope, claimed him, and he denounced or compelled to accept Christianity. So you will call, Kevin Brown, who was originally Mustafa.
Yeah.
You know, right? So the renaming of the continents was done by the colonists. You see, what's called England today was called Albania. If you look it up, you'll check and verify. It's not always America. So I'm just talking about geography right now, from the point whereas they have miseducated the masses. They have colonized not only the continent but our minds. So very much so we are, you will say in today's time, whitewashed. But even in America, they weren't called white; they were called Caucasians. So this is a little history.
Okay, finally, as a former ambassador at large for IHRC Foundation Group in Geneva, how did you work with the UN influence the creation of IHRC-USA Regional? What was the key advice from the UN representative that shaped this initiative?
Yes, a few years back, I was on Facebook and WhatsApp, certain social media components, and when I was a part of IHRC Foundation, right, I'm the guy named Ralph, right, he appointed me ambassador at large to the U.S.
Yeah.
He is originally from Poland, but he registered his international organization in Switzerland. He referred to me by another individual named Michael, one of my Jewish brothers from California. And I represented his interests here in the U.S. But one of our goals was to get that international organization recognized by the UN. So I got my pass through him, and I sat at ECOSOC sessions to await the approval. However, they were denied representation or acknowledgement by the UN here.
Okay.
All right. But during that time, I was on social media, and he had about 34 or 35 countries. I mean, Cameroon, he had Yemen, India, Nigeria. I can go down a line of different, countries. So we call it Africa and Middle East, right? We had Africans, we had people from the Middle East.
Yeah.
That was part of it. That was a MISA. So when I started engaging them, I realized, they realized basically that I was giving them advice. I was giving them direction. I was giving them hope. I was able to relate with them because, Ralph, he was Caucasian, and I'm of Moorish descent. And so I understand the issues of my people more than primarily the other folks, right? So one of the guys who was a member of IHRC Foundation, he wanted to link me to all of the members in that foundation. And he put a group on WhatsApp, and I started recommending, providing goods to different countries and how they can work together themselves with an economic plan that we're currently in the making of at this time. And I was working on establishing a link between the Africans and the African Americans. That's the tie. And so as they was moved by what I was saying, it became really involved. And then Ralph, who was Secretary General of that organization, I guess a little jealousy and things of that nature came about. We had a conflict of interest, and I already knew people in the UN. Philomena is her name from Nigeria. There was some underhanded things that were taking place on the other organization, and she and another person with an NGO advised me to step off and reestablish a base here in the U.S. on behalf of our people, you know, and that's basically what I did. And during that time, I remember Philomena, she linked me to a sister from, I think it was from Colombia. I didn't have at that time a 501c3 status. And Burkina Faso, the consulate is on 125th Street off Morningside. And when I got linked with Philomena through another individual as well, connected me to the consulate of Burkina Faso. And through the NGO, I was able to get 40 plus computers. And we had a split. And I've taken those computers to the consulate of Burkina Faso to give it to the youth that they were training, you know, there. So that was a network. But that was all done under my IHRC-USA regional organization. So that kind of like drove me more and more to get more involved. And the I don't know the name of the country, African country, but the son of the prime minister, he actually connected me with the ambassadors of DC and the ambassador of the US. I mean, New York City and DC. We met downtown at one of the consular houses, and we discussed how we can establish a connection with African Americans. And I met also with the council from Burkina Faso at Sylvia's in Harlem. We had lunch there, and we discussed the same thing, you know. So with that, I just made sure that I legitimize IHRC-USA regional for the U.S. to establish a humanitarian base for our people.
Yes. Okay. Today, your organization focuses on 6 pillars: economic, development, health, humanitarian, aid, climate actions, and others. How do these directly support the UN 2030 agenda, particularly with SDGs, your top priorities?
One of my sisters from South Africa, her name is Anne. She's my secretary and one of my top secretaries in South Africa currently. She went to the meeting in Dubai a couple years ago. So it's still gathering information and getting people to join that committee in order to have a voice, right? And to encourage, like we did in Kenya. I have also a representative in Kenya, and what she did in Kenya, she had the whole community. You can see them. You probably saw it on the
Facebook,
on the website.
On the website, yes.
That sister there, you'll see she had the Amisa's banner, right? And people cleaning up the grass, the water, right? 'Cause the environment. So through the secretary in South Africa, and I have 2 people who are heading in Kenya, they're providing services in an area regarding climate change. So my whole goal with that, powers in the people, right, is to get my African brothers and sisters to collaborate and to impact change by being ground on, right? Right on the ground, doing the work that they are doing. You know, I did give them the authority to establish a MISA there because it's a subset on the IHRC-USA regional. But without the sisters, I must say, it wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah. What specific collaboration does IHRC-US regional have with the UN agency, and how do you leverage this partnership to amplify impact, especially for African and Middle Eastern diaspora community in the US?
I didn't really hear the very last part.
I will do it again. Okay, what specific collaboration does IHRC-USA regional have with UN agency, and how do you leverage this partnership to amplify impact, especially for African and Middle Eastern diaspora communities in the US?
Good question. Good question. So number one, the key thing is collaboration. Yeah. At number 17 of the goals, right? SDGs. Yeah. 17 is partnership, right? And engagement, collaboration. Yeah. All right. So, take for example the one sister she's from Cuba or Colombia, right? That's one collaboration. You see, right? I met with the ambassador. He's an African from New Jersey. Dealing with the African diaspora. I spoke there last year when they raised the flag of Cote d'Ivoire, right? Collaboration. You see, my goal, the overall, is to sit down with a council of different representatives of different countries to discuss the issues briefly, to devise a strategy, and to implement the same through necessary channels, and to receive funding as possible, right, for the cause. And if funding is lacked by reaching out, then we will self-fund by promoting opportunities universally, all right? So that's one thing. The main thing is to sit down with different nationalities that can represent different countries. I don't mean top individuals. That's good too, right? But if we're sitting down and discussing issues about Cameroon, right? So what do we need to, what are the issues? What's lacking? Why is it vulnerable? What was the disruption, right? And what strategy is best? Compare strategies. Who do we need to connect with to qualify? And then what time frame, right? Benchmarks, right? Measured throughout the year. What's more of an urgent need, right? These are the things we need to actually do. Because we as a people need to discuss these matters, us, to make it happen. At the UN last year, human rights, I spoke to Ambassador Green at the time, to the US. She made it very clear that the UN needs help, that the UN cannot do it alone. On the panel, different countries, you know, you can hear the cry. The UN appears to be incompetent, where they lack the access, they lack the resources, right? So we need to do inside relationships in order to collaborate and have a brainstorm for impact.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, now let's go to the fourth question. Maybe the question will be close to the one you just give an answer. With rising global displacement, how does your organization address refugees, migrant rights, SDG 10, reduce inequality while working under U.S. non-profit guidelines? Particularly in this specific time when this migrant issue actually is rising here in America.
Yeah, it's very complicated because Trump is an iron hand. You know, his troops are enforcing it. You know, MISA is a 501c3, even though it's under IHRC, IHRC is not a 501c3.
Yeah.
That limits what you can and cannot do,
Yeah.
right? This is why I'm still on the edge. If I'm going to allow IHRC-USA regional to get that status,
Yeah.
right? How can you address it? You know, we have to look at the law already established and say that they have a right to be here,
Yeah.
right? Now, the process that one must go through for their background is what the government got to be in compliant to, right? But we can't just put them out of the country without going through a process,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of them have been released out of the USA unconstitutionally, unlawful, and shouldn't be,
Yeah.
right? So the UN has 193 member states, but the power is still lacking regarding the issues of the migrants.
Yeah.
The U.S. is very powerful. It will take other countries to put pressure on the U.S. and compel them. And I think that's through economics. The best thing that can damage America is the dollar. You know, how currently they're trying to damage the world by raising up tariffs to settle their economic gain, the wealthy, the rich, the most powerful. Countries around us must unite and hold back. But right now, we're in their pockets. The U.S. is in their pockets. We got to kill those ties in order to have a voice on how our people here in America are transforming, not in our favor, but being put out in disfavor.
Okay, now let's go to climate change and justice equity. Now, climate change disproportionately affect vulnerable population. How does IHRC-US integrate environmental justice into its human rights mission?
As I mentioned earlier, so Sister Anne from South Africa and Kenya are primarily working on that at the project. I am primarily the one that hears it and strategize as invitation. Now, what's also good, I'm currently in a program by Oxford called the Corporate Affairs Academy, right? It's a corporate affairs invite only. I was fortunate to be accepted, and that's one of our issues, because climate change is ongoing, right? And there are many things that's green, you know, the economy, you know, right? Oil, right? A lot of things are being affected by climate change. So that's going to be an ongoing process here. You know, a think tank, my plan is to, like the health department, right? Health, number 3, right?
Yeah.
So health talks about WHO, right? The World Health Organization.
Yes, sir.
That was removed by Trump, right? We need to treat our own WHO.
Yeah.
We got our own issues. So my plan is to have a committee for that alone as a focus. Climate, I have somebody right now molding that, creating an opportunity for us. That's their position. I have a council that I'm developing, which is Father Philip Charles. He's from Haiti. And we've been contributing towards the orphanage homes in Haiti, all right, as we speak. We've also been supplying medical supplies to Haiti as well, all right? But my plan is to have a council of representatives from different countries to discuss these issues, and not just talk, but to plan, you know, and meet with who got to meet with to move the agenda.
Yeah, great. Okay, now, 7. Transparency and U.S. non-profit governance. As 501c3, how does IHRC-US ensure accountability to both the IRS and the UN humanitarian principle in funding and operations?
As long as, and I'll say it again, right? IHRC is not currently under a 501c3, only a MISA, right? We're discussing this right now. My actually main officer for protocol, she's working on it as we speak. All right, it limits us, right, to do much, right? Because if the IRS removes your status, you get no funds, right? So that affects impact, right? But there's a program that I introduced to a MISA, and all I know about it in about 30-something countries. It's a program by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It's an economic plan, part 1 and part 2. And that plan is to primarily, we have to, as a people, pull our own resources and provide for ourselves. So if we have 22 million people in Africa, we know it's more than that, right?
Yeah.
And if they give, let's say $104 for 1 year, $22 million, how much is that? Absolutely. Get 22 million, they go our banks, they go our housings, they go our factories, they go our food supplies, right? They go our health, our education, right? We gotta put our own resources. That was the plan of Ahmad Muhammad in 34. That was the year. And right now they have it today, restaurants and so forth. We gotta stop depending on a 501c3. We gotta stop depending on the colonists, the colonial settlers. Africa is rich, right? Great minds came out of Africa. Egypt is in Africa, for example, right? You know, many people are part white, part black, mixed, but the original Africans are black, dark olive, right? So we have to put on resources in order to take care of our own economics and not be subject, because the IRS is saying, or Trump is saying, you know, we ain't gonna give you no money because you DEI, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we don't need your money, right? We have our own money. You know what I'm saying? We will invest in our own economics, our own economic sovereignty. That is my goal.
Okay, great. Okay. Now the last question: how can activities, policymakers, and everyday citizens support your works to advance the SDG, whether through advocacy, volunteering, or partnership?
Collaboration starts with trust. Looking at the ideas and ensuring that they are in line with yours, with the goals set forth on behalf of all humanity. Those who will volunteer and those with capital that can support our agenda and have accountability in place. That's how it can be done. Once they see our work, like you saw, for example, on the website, we need more of that. See, you didn't see pictures, you saw videos. Yes. When Syria had the earthquake, you saw that video too?
Yes.
The van with Amisa, right? It was feeding the people. And it was dealing with the youth in terms of emotional trauma. This is an ambassador we have in Syria today. These are the countries that I have under me. But they need more of us to drive. So how? Contact you. Contact you. And we arrange a sit down. Because when you're making plans, it's more meetings than one. More meetings than two, right? Because they ask, how can I help? How am I able to contribute? Right? So it's always three things. We need your time, your talent, or or your treasure, or all three. If you don't have no treasure, give your time. Give your time. Right? We can pool our resources. It may not be $100. It might be $5. But still imagine 22 million people plus giving $5. And those who are accountants, those who are financial advisors, they're telling us how to make the money grow. But we invest it out of America. Right? We invest it in our own banks, in our own resources. Right? Right? You know, we come with a plan. We only put the qualified men and women in place for the job and establish a check and balance. So we have to get people that wants to partner with us, that wants to collaborate, right? And we have to see this here 10 and 20 years out, beyond our time, so our kids can build on it.
Okay. Now, Your Excellencies, as we conclude, what is your urgent message to world leaders, policymakers, and communities, both here in USA and across the globe, who have the power to advance human rights and the sustainable development goals? How can we collectively turn pledge into tangible change for the most vulnerable?
I love your question. Many world leaders, including Africa, has bought into the compromise. Many of them have sold the country's resources to America, China, even parts of European powers. That's going to involve a lot of work. A lot of work. The 193 member states, they're trying. That's the New World Order. Even they're having problems at this time. We need a unified front, you know, with the purpose of humanity in the front of us. The governments of the world are using us to profit. So America says, we the people, that means us. Placing order by the people, for the people. But America, for example, is acting as they're we the people. And they are the people. And they're for themselves. And many countries abroad has sold us out. You know, what do you do? Unfortunately, it's a hard task. But we have to control our money, control our dollars. And we got to show the countries of the world that we are the ones that help the countries move, the engine move. We are the ones that qualify that. If we stop spending, their power diminishes. If we stop spending in their global market, their power diminishes. We have to re-establish our power in Africa with African descendants and control our own resources. Control them. You know, I think that is where it starts. It's hard for me to give world leaders the message because behind the door, they're not giving up the powers that they have. You know, once we have power as a people, then we can sit down with them and tell them what we would like, and if not, then we withdraw our investment. Imagine right now, we put all our monies in black banks. Take all your money out the banks of theirs, put it in yours. That's showing your power. Invest in your own. See, we don't have leverage. Our leverage is that money. Our leverage is that resource that we have control over. You know, if we can control our spending, manage it properly, then they'll come to our table. We buy big brands, Ralph Lauren, you know, Brook Brothers, the old brand, you know, Boss, you know, Gucci, right? Why not create our own brands? Show them that we have the power. So you want to deal with the power to be in the world? We have to show the dollar, our spending, our money, and revert to our own power. You can sit down with them. We say, this is what we would like, or no. So now we demand, you say no, then we pull back. And teach the same concept to our youth so that they don't target just you, but millions of us. And they realize it is hard to do. Right? So I cannot give you a dream to say, well, the leaders of the world, oh, let's all have a discussion about the issues. 193 member states are already doing that. We have NGOs all in the UN helping out because those 193 member states cannot do it alone. But they're relying on the people. So that, my brother, is the answer that I can get as best of my ability to this problem. Who controls Africa? It's a face. But when you sit down with so-called white man, it's a different deal. You see, why the most powerful countries in the world of Africa? Many of them, not all. You see it on the website, not doing so well. We was on top, and now we're in beneath. And recently, Trump had even taxed some African countries. High tariff. You understand?
Yeah.
You know, and you call us migrants. But your descendants colonized America. You weren't the original Aborigines here. You see? So who are the true migrants? Right? But that's a whole battle. You know, that's history. You see? We can't get caught up into that. We have to now make plans to, as you mentioned earlier, collaborate. We need to get the right minds together, the think tanks, you know, the doers, the knowers. Less talk, just action. So if partners can come, we can collaborate. You know, time, talent, resources, the treasure. Because without finance, which is number eight under those goals, without finance, we have nothing. Poverty cannot be satisfied. Neither health, neither education without what? Economics. We must implement economics and partnership in order to satisfy the other concerns. Now 230, that's the mark. Remember, prior to that time, they extended it. And it was discussed that due to the pandemic, we had a setback. So more than likely, it'll go beyond 2030. Now we have this great possible recession. We have another recess, right?
Yeah.
Wait, setback. So now you're looking at beyond 2030, right? So we have to think, as I mentioned earlier, 20 years out, 30 years out. You know, so when we sit down, we can't talk about this year. We got to do, like I said, in finance,
Yes.
that 3-year mark, right? We got to do that 10 and 20 year out. Even if we're not here, us that is, our youth can carry it on. You see, that is my voice. So when I deal with my NGO, And let me share with you, right? So I deal with it from a governmental standpoint. All 17 goals, as mentioned, it should be a committee addressing every issue. You know, but in business, let's prioritize. Which one take precedence? Health, right? That's first. You know, then economics. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? You know, the other factors come in place. Who is actually talking about this